The night was quiet, too quiet for a desert that never truly slept. Stars shimmered like cold fires above, and the wind carried sand across the barren dunes. Evan Cole, a human engineer working on a remote research outpost, was fixing a broken rover near his camp when the silence broke. A flash of blue light cut through the sky. It wasn't a shooting star, it moved too slow, too heavy. The object twisted, burning brighter as it tore through the thin clouds. Then came the sound, a deep roar that shook the ground. The crash followed seconds later, far beyond the ridge. Evan froze, tools still in his hand. His heart pounded fast. It wasn't uncommon for old satellites to fall, but this looked different. The light was alive, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat even after impact. He grabbed his flashlight, his oxygen pack, and started walking toward the glow. The desert was endless, but the closer he got, the more he felt something strange, like static in the air, tingling on his skin. The sand smelled of metal and smoke. When he reached the crater, the sight made him stop breathing for a second. It wasn't a satellite. It was a pod, small, oval, and unlike anything human-made. Its silver surface shimmered under the moonlight, cracked open from the side. Steam hissed softly. A faint hum came from within, like a wounded heartbeat. Cautiously, Evan climbed down the crater's edge and aimed his light inside. His throat went dry. There was someone in there. A figure lay curled inside the wreck, tangled in strange glowing wires, skin pale as moonlight, eyes large and faintly golden, markings that ran like veins of light across her arms. It was a girl. No, not human. Alien. For a moment, Evan thought she was dead. Then her hand twitched. She lifted her head weakly, her lips moving, but no sound came out. Only silence. She tried again, desperate, trembling. Nothing. Easy, Evan whispered, though she couldn't understand him. I won't hurt you. She blinked at him, eyes full of fear and pain. She tried to reach out, but her arm fell back limply. Evan climbed closer, pulling a small plasma cutter from his belt. The wreck was still hot. He sliced through the half-melted frame and cleared the debris until he could lift her out. The moment his hands touched her, a strange pulse ran through his glove, like a whisper against his mind. She wasn't cold. Her skin was warm and faintly glowing. He carried her out of the pod, laid her gently on the sand. Her breathing was shallow. There was a metal collar around her neck fused to her skin with faint blue runes. Evan examined it. It looked like a voice suppression device. Some kind of control tech, you poor thing, he muttered. What happened to you? She blinked again, trying to speak. When no sound came, she grew frustrated and reached for the sand beside her. With a trembling finger, she drew a single shaky word. Help. Evan's heart tightened. The wind blew across the desert, almost carrying her message away. He nodded quickly. All right. You're safe now. I'll help. He lifted her carefully and began the long walk back to his rover. Each step was heavy, but he didn't stop. The stars above seemed to watch silently as a human carried an alien across a dead world. Halfway back, the girl stirred again. Her eyes darted toward the dark horizon as if she sensed something unseen. Evan followed her gaze but saw nothing. Just sand and shadow. Still, the hairs on his arms rose. Someone or something was out there. When they reached the rover, he placed her inside, covered her with a thermal blanket, and sealed the door. Her breathing steadied. Evan glanced once more at the desert behind them. A faint blue flicker appeared on the horizon, matching the crash site's energy signature. Who's following you? He whispered. The girl's golden eyes met his through the glass, and for a brief second he felt a strange emotion. Trust. She didn't need words. Somehow he understood. She had run from something terrible. Evan started the rover, engines humming softly. As he drove toward his camp, the blue light behind them grew brighter. Something had found the crash site. He didn't look back again. Whatever had silenced her was still out there, and now he had become part of it. The desert swallowed the wreck, the sound of engines fading into the night. Inside the rover, the alien girl finally closed her eyes, her hand still clutching the edge of the seat as if holding onto life itself. And in that moment, Evan didn't know that the choice he made to stop and help would change both their worlds forever. Morning light spilled over the dunes, painting the desert gold. Evan hadn't slept. He sat beside the alien girl, watching the rise and fall of her breathing. She was still weak, her glowing skin dim under the faint light. The collar around her neck flickered with small blue sparks. Every time it glowed, her body tensed in pain. Evan's small outpost was quiet. The solar panels hummed softly, Machines clicked in the corner. It was a lonely place. He had built it to study mineral storms, not to shelter a fugitive from another world. Yet now this fragile being lay in his medical pod and he couldn't walk away. He scanned the collar again with his tools. Some kind of neural lock, he muttered, eyes fixed on the readings. Blocks vocal signals directly from the brainstem. That's cruel. The girl opened her eyes, golden and calm. She watched his mouth move but couldn't understand the words. Evan pointed to himself. Evan. Then he pointed to her, raising a brow. She blinked, touched her chest, and tried to speak. Nothing came. Then she frowned and wrote with her finger on the glass of the pod. Lyra. Evan smiled softly. Lyra got it, she nodded once. A weak smile flickered on her face before vanishing in pain as the collar glowed again. Evan cursed under his breath. Whoever did this wanted her silent and suffering. He stood and moved to his workbench. His mind raced. He had spent years building tools that could repair circuits, engines, even voice modulators for damaged droids. Maybe he could use that knowledge to give her voice back, but it wouldn't be easy. He needed an organic frequency, a living voice imprint to sync the modulation core. A perfect sound pattern to reprogram her neural link. Machines couldn't do that. Only a real voice could. He worked for hours, connecting wires, building a small circular device no larger than his palm. The core pulsed faintly, alive with white-blue light. Lyra watched him the whole time, her eyes following every move, her expression unreadable. When he finished, he brought the device to her pod. This might hurt a little, he said softly, though he knew she couldn't hear him. He attached the device to the collar, fingers trembling slightly. Sparks flew and the room filled with a strange low hum. The collar's runes glowed brighter, fighting the new signal. Lyra gasped silently, gripping the bed. Evan adjusted the settings, sweat forming on his forehead. The machine beeped sharply. Then suddenly everything went dark, the power shorted out, damn it. He slammed the console. The lights flickered back on a moment later, but the device was smoking. He pulled it off before it burned out completely. Lyra looked at him, her eyes wide. Tears glimmered there, not from pain, but from something else. Hope. Evan sighed, sitting beside her again. I'm trying, he whispered. I just don't know how to bypass it without a voice. That word voice stayed in his head. He glanced at the modulation core, then at her. The readings had recorded his voice while he spoke. It was faint, but the device had copied the frequency of his vocal signature. An idea sparked. A dangerous one. If he transferred his voice into the modulation core, it could replace the missing organic frequency the collar needed. It might work, but once the transfer completed, he would lose his ability to speak. Permanently. He stared at the girl lying silently before him. Her eyes followed him with trust, confusion, and something deeper, fear that he might give up. He turned away, pacing the room. The hum of the machine seemed louder now. His entire life was built on his voice, on communication, teaching, and laughter. Could he live without it? Lyra suddenly reached out. Her fingers brushed his sleeve. He turned to her and she pointed to his throat, shaking her head. She didn't know his plan, but somehow she sensed it. She didn't want him to risk it. Evan forced a small smile. You deserve a voice, Lyra. Everyone does. He began adjusting the controls again, connecting the core directly to the collar interface. The machine pulsed brighter this time, drawing energy from the main generator. A soft hum filled the lab, steady, alive. Lyra sat up weakly, eyes wide. She shook her head again, tears forming. He raised his hand, signaling for her to stay still. The transfer sequence began. Evan took a deep breath and spoke one last time. Use it well. Light flooded the room. The machine hissed. Evan gasped, his pain shot through his throat like fire. His voice broke mid-breath, then vanished completely. He fell to his knees, clutching his neck, unable to make a sound. Lyra screamed, but for the first time sound came out. A soft, trembling cry that echoed in the small lab. Her voice. She looked down at him, horrified, realizing what he had done. Her new voice trembled as she spoke her first word, the one she had wanted to say since the moment they met. Evan. He looked up, smiling faintly, unable to reply, but his eyes said everything, and for the first time in her life, Lyra's silence was broken, while his had just begun. The lab was silent except for the steady hum of the machines. Evan sat on the cold floor, his throat burning, his breath uneven. No sound came out, only the emptiness where his voice used to be. He tried to say her name, but nothing. Only air. Lyra knelt beside him, her golden eyes wide with fear. She called out softly, her voice shaky and strange. "Evan, can you hear me?" The sound startled her. For the first time in her life, she could hear her own words. She touched her throat, still not believing it was real. Then she looked at him again, realizing what it had cost. Tears rolled down her pale cheeks. She tried to help him stand, whispering again and again, "Why? Why would you do this?" But Evan only smiled weakly and pointed to her throat. His eyes said what his mouth couldn't, "Because you needed it more." The machine beside them still glowed faintly. The transfer process had left strange patterns across the lab floor, like scars of light. Evan leaned against the console, exhausted. He wanted to reassure her, to tell her she was safe now, but his silence said enough. Lyra looked around, hearing the world for the first time. The faint hum of circuits, the soft wind against the window, the beating of her own heart. Sound filled her mind, overwhelming and beautiful. Yet it hurt too, because the first voice she ever heard was gone. Hours passed. Evan collapsed onto the cot near his desk, finally drifting into restless sleep. Lyra sat near him, watching the slow rhythm of his breathing. She whispered his name again, quietly. "Evan." His eyes opened slightly. He smiled but said nothing. She wanted to say thank you, but the words felt too small. Instead, she looked at his machines, his tools, his notes, his recordings. He had built this life alone, surviving in silence long before he lost his voice. And still he had chosen to give it away for her. As she explored the lab, Lyra found a holographic photo on the wall. It showed Evan with a group of humans, scientists, soldiers, engineers. A younger version of him was laughing in the middle. She touched the image gently, her voice trembling. "You were happy once." The console flickered suddenly. A message appeared across the screen in alien script, one she recognized instantly. It was a tracking signal. Her people had located the crash site. They were coming. Panic rushed through her. "No," she whispered. "They can't find me here." She turned to Evan, who was already awake, reading the alert on his tablet. His face went pale. Without speaking, he began preparing, packing tools, sealing systems, erasing logs. He pointed to the message, then at her, trying to ask, "Are they after you?" Lyra nodded slowly. "They don't want me alive," she said softly. I broke their silence. I tried to speak for humans once. They punished me for it. Evan's expression hardened. He motioned toward the underground shelter beneath the lab. But Lyra hesitated. She looked at the machine that had given her voice and then at him. "You can't fight them," she said. "They'll destroy this place." He shook his head. He wasn't going to abandon her. He gestured firmly. "Hide. I'll deal with it." Lyra clenched her fists. She could finally speak, finally tell someone what she felt, and now he couldn't answer. "No," she whispered. "I won't run." Outside, a distant rumble echoed through the desert. The air shimmered with faint blue light. Alien ships were descending, searching. Evan grabbed a small plasma pistol from his drawer and loaded the cell. His hand shook, but his eyes were steady. Lyra stepped in front of him. "You can't even call for help," she said, voice breaking. "Let me talk to them." "I can try." He paused, then nodded slowly. It was a risk, but it was all they had. Lyra walked to the communication console, her hand hovering over the transmit switch. She had never used her own voice before. Now it carried not just her sound, but his essence. She activated the signal. "This is Lyra of the Arin," she said clearly. "I am alive, and I'm not your prisoner anymore." Her words traveled across the desert sky, sharp and defiant. For a moment, there was only static. Then a voice replied, cold, mechanical, commanding. "Return to custody, Lyra. You carry forbidden energy. The human will be erased." Lyra's body trembled. She looked at Evan, who shook his head and mouthed, "Don't." But she had already made her choice. "If you want me," she said, her tone rising with strength, "you'll have to listen to the voice you tried to silence." She turned off the transmission and faced Evan. For the first time, he saw not a fragile alien girl, but a warrior reborn through his sacrifice. He smiled, silent but proud. And outside, under the endless desert stars, the hunt had begun. The sun burned low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert base. The air was heavy, tense, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Evan stood by the window, staring at the faint blue glows flickering in the distance. Alien ships slowly descending. He could not call for help, could not shout a warning. Silence was now his life. Lyra stood beside him, her hands trembling. The voice she had gained only hours ago now felt like both a gift and a curse. She could feel his eyes on her, worried, trusting, ready to sacrifice again if it came to that. She whispered softly, "They're close, Evan. Too close." He nodded, already working. He pulled open the floor hatch, revealing a hidden space filled with old defense drones and plasma coils. His fingers moved fast, fixing circuits, reloading power cells. Lyra watched him, amazed by his calmness even when danger loomed. When the first tremor hit, dust rained from the ceiling. The ground shook. Outside, blue lights cut through the darkness as alien crafts landed near the ridge. A loud voice boomed from the communication speakers, a language Lyra understood too well. "Lyra of the Erin, you are ordered to surrender. The human will be eliminated. Step outside." Evan gritted his teeth and slammed the power switch. The base lights dimmed, shifting to emergency red. The defense drones hummed to life, their lenses glowing. He pointed toward the exit tunnel, signaling Lyra to go, but she shook her head firmly. "No," she said. "They silenced me once. I won't be silent again." He frowned, gesturing with both hands, trying to tell her it was too dangerous. But Lyra stepped forward, her golden eyes glowing brighter. "You gave me your voice, Evan. Let me use it now." Before he could stop her, she opened the main door. The desert wind rushed in, dry and sharp. She stepped out into the fading light as 3 alien soldiers approached, their armor gleaming like liquid glass. Each held a pulse weapon trained directly on her. One of them, the commander, raised his arm. "You should have stayed mute, traitor." Lyra's body shook, but she stood tall. "You stole our voices because you feared them," she said, her tone steady. "But you cannot silence the truth forever." The soldiers hesitated. Hearing her speak was like hearing a myth come alive. Her voice carried power, rich, harmonic, layered with an echo that wasn't just hers. Evan's vocal imprint resonated within it, deep and human, giving it strength. When the commander aimed his weapon, Evan fired first. His plasma bolt hit the ground near their feet, exploding in a burst of sand and light. The soldiers scattered, returning fire. Energy blasts cut through the air, striking the outpost walls. Lyra ducked, screaming his name, but he couldn't answer. He waved at her to get back inside. She hesitated only for a moment before rushing to the console. Her mind raced. Evan had linked the communication system to the defense drones earlier. She might be able to control them using voice commands. She grabbed the microphone, heart pounding. "Defense drones, activate perimeter mode." The machines responded instantly, rising into the air with a synchronized whir. Blue targeting lights locked onto the incoming soldiers. Lyra gasped. It worked. Her voice, Evan's frequency mixed within it, controlled the system perfectly. "Fire," she said. Beams of light shot through the dark, slamming into the ground near the invaders. The soldiers fell back, shouting in their alien tongue. For the first time, the silence was broken not by fear but by her command. Evan watched, pride shining in his eyes. His creation, his sacrifice, was now saving them both. But the relief didn't last long. Above them, a larger ship descended, its engines roaring like thunder. The commander's voice echoed through the air again. "You cannot win, Lyra. Return, or we will burn this world with you." Lyra's chest tightened. She looked at Evan. He was shaking his head, signaling her to escape through the tunnel. But she couldn't leave him, not after what he'd done. Her voice might stop them, or doom them both. She took a deep breath and shouted toward the sky, her words amplified through the comm system. "You call us rebels, but we only wanted to speak. You call him human, but he showed more mercy than your entire kind." Her voice spread across the desert, bouncing through frequencies, echoing through alien channels. The soldiers froze. The ship above hesitated. They were hearing something forbidden, emotion. Lyra stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong. "You can kill us, but you can't kill what we are. I am not your weapon anymore." The air fell still. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the commander lowered his weapon. His face was unreadable, but his voice was softer. "You sound human." Lyra didn't answer. She just turned to Evan, who nodded silently. The ship withdrew, slowly lifting off into the twilight sky. The soldiers followed, leaving nothing behind but scorch marks in the sand. Lyra collapsed to her knees, shaking. Evan rushed to her side, holding her steady. She looked at him, tears shining under the fading light. "They heard me," she whispered. "They finally heard. Evan smiled faintly. His silence had spoken louder than words ever could. The night returned heavy and still, but peace didn't follow. The desert wind howled through the cracked windows of the outpost, carrying the echo of departing ships. Lyra sat beside the generator, trembling. Her body was exhausted, her voice raw from what she had done. Evan, silent as ever, was fixing the damaged circuits on the wall. The flickering lights reflected off his tired face. They both knew it wasn't over. The ships hadn't left in mercy. They had left to regroup. Lyra could still hear their last transmission in her mind. "Capture the human. Recover the voice core." She glanced at Evan, who was now working with a focused calm that both comforted and terrified her. He had always been ready to sacrifice himself. That scared her more than the enemy itself. "Evan," she said softly, her new voice trembling. "They're coming back, aren't they?" He didn't respond. He couldn't, but the look in his eyes told her everything. He nodded once, then pointed to the radar screen on the far console. 3 dots pulsed on the edge of the scanner, fast-moving signals closing in. Lyra's breath caught. 3 ships, maybe more behind them. Evan typed quickly on the terminal, the words appearing on the screen for her to read. "We can't outrun them. We hide, we fight smart," she shook her head. "No, they're tracking my signal. Wherever I go, they'll follow. You should run, Evan. You didn't do anything wrong." He looked at her sharply, his expression fierce. He pointed at her heart, then at his own chest. "No. We face this together." Lyra's throat tightened. She wanted to argue, but something about his steady silence made her stop. She finally nodded. Together. The next hour was a blur. Evan worked like a machine, setting up traps, calibrating drones, reinforcing the main door with steel braces. Lyra followed his gestures, connecting power cells and voice control nodes as he directed. When the last drone hummed online, the small base looked more like a fortress. Then the radar beeped again, louder this time. The dots were closer now, almost above them. Lyra moved to the window and looked up. 3 ships sliced through the night sky, lights blinking like blue fireflies. Her heart raced. She turned to Evan. "They found us." He nodded and gestured for her to stay low. He crouched near the wall, pulling out a small control pad connected to his defensive system. The drones activated, silently taking position outside the base, half buried in sand. Moments later, the first explosion came. A pulse blast hit the outer shield, shaking the ground. The sound was deafening. Lyra covered her ears as another blast followed. The sky lit up blue. Evan pressed buttons rapidly, triggering the counter-defense. Plasma drones shot upward, firing beams at the descending ships. The desert erupted in light and sound. Through the chaos, Lyra heard voices. Alien voices, broadcasting through her collar's old frequency. "Target confirmed. Retrieve the voice. Eliminate resistance," her hands clenched. The voice. They weren't after her. They were after Evan's voice, now embedded in her. Realization hit like lightning. "Evan," she shouted. "They're not just hunting me, they're hunting your voice." He turned sharply, eyes wide. Before he could react, the roof burst open. Metal shards flew as an alien drone crashed through. Evan pushed her aside just as it fired, the beam grazing his shoulder. He fell with a silent gasp, pain twisting across his face. Lyra screamed, grabbing the plasma cutter from the table. Her instincts took over. She swung the beam of light through the drone's armor, sparks flying. The machine collapsed, smoke rising from its wreckage. She rushed to Evan. His shoulder was bleeding, but he waved her off, typing shakily on his pad. "You have to leave. Take the voice far from here." She shook her head violently. "No, you gave it to me." "It's ours now." The base shook again. Another ship was landing nearby. She could hear metal feet marching outside. Dozens of soldiers. There was no time left. Evan's hands moved quickly again, tapping a final sequence into the console. The underground tunnel hatch opened, revealing a small hovercraft hidden below. He pointed at it, then at her, begging her to go. Tears streamed down Lyra's face. "You're coming too," she said. He shook his head slowly. Then he reached up, touched her throat gently where her voice now lived, and smiled. The moment froze. Then he pressed one last button. The outer defense grid exploded in light, sending shockwaves across the desert. Alien soldiers screamed as drones and plasma mines detonated. Evan turned to her one final time and mouthed the words she had learned to read. "Live." Lyra stumbled into the hovercraft, gripping the controls with shaking hands. The craft lifted just as the base walls collapsed in flames. Through the smoke, she saw him standing there, silent, unbroken, defiant, before the explosion swallowed everything in white light. The hovercraft sped across the dunes, carrying her away. Her throat ached with the voice he gave her. As the dawn broke, she whispered into the empty wind, her words trembling. "I'll come back for you, Evan. I swear it." The desert stayed quiet, but somewhere beneath that silence, his sacrifice still echoed. The desert stretched endlessly beneath the morning sun, silent except for the faint hum of Lyra's small hovercraft cutting across the dunes. Smoke still rose behind her, the ruins of Evan's outpost burning against the pale sky. She didn't look back. If she did, she might never move again. Her hands shook on the controls, her body trembling with exhaustion and grief. Every sound echoed inside her head, the explosion, the scream of engines, the last look in Evan's eyes. But through it all, one thing remained inside her, his voice. Not just the sound of it, but the warmth, the patience, the courage. It lived within her now, fused with her own. The hovercraft's console flickered, showing a faint signal. The alien fleet was still searching for her. Dozens of ships scanning the sands, hunting the voice they'd once forbidden. She had nowhere left to run, but she had an idea. Something only Evan would have thought of. She turned the craft toward the ruins of an old comms tower, half buried in sand. The Erin fleet used it once to control this region. If she could reactivate it, she could send a message to everyone, humans and Erin alike. A message they couldn't silence. When she reached the tower, it was half collapsed and dead, its antenna broken, metal twisted by time. She stumbled out of the craft, clutching a toolkit. "You built worlds from scraps," she whispered, remembering Evan's hands moving over broken circuits. "I can try too." For hours she worked beneath the blazing sun. Sweat stung her eyes as she reconnected cables, replaced fuses, and powered the ancient reactor. Finally, the tower hummed faintly. Lights blinked along the base. It was alive again, but weak. Lyra placed her hand on the console and closed her eyes. "Please," she whispered, "just one transmission." The air shimmered as the system powered on. A faint signal flared across frequencies. Human, alien, everything in between. The tower waited for input. She took a deep breath. Her heart raced. Then she spoke. "This is Lyra of the Erin," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "To my people. To the humans. Hear me." Her words carried across the sky, resonating with both tones, hers and Evan's, merged perfectly. The system amplified it, sending her message far beyond the desert. "You taught us that emotion is weakness," she continued, "that compassion is noise. But I have heard the voice of a human who gave up his own so that I could speak. He had every reason to hate us, but he chose kindness." Her voice grew stronger as the power increased. "He fought for me, protected me, and when I lost all hope, he gave me something no one else ever had. The chance to be heard. His silence saved me." In orbit above the planet, both fleets, human and Erin, detected her signal. Commanders paused. Soldiers looked up from their controls. Her voice spread like a ripple of light, echoing in both languages. "I know you hear me," she said softly, tears in her eyes. "You call me a traitor, but if this is betrayal, then I will betray your hatred 1,000 times. Because the human who lost his voice taught me what it truly means to speak." She paused, trembling. Her next words came slowly, carefully, each one resonating with the strength of two hearts. "Thank you." That was all she said. 2 simple words, but they carried through every signal, every frequency, through warships and command channels, through human radios and alien beacons. The phrase struck deep into every listener. The humans heard sincerity, and the Erin heard something ancient, a word their ancestors had erased from their language long ago. Gratitude. The world fell silent. Not a hostile silence, not fear, but peace. On the human fleet's command bridge, an officer whispered, "Was that her, the alien girl?" And on the Erin mothership, the commander, who had once ordered her silenced, lowered his head. "The forbidden word," he murmured. She remembered it. For the first time in decades, no one fired. No alarms, no orders. Just silence that felt alive. Lyra fell to her knees beside the console, tears streaming freely now. The tower lights dimmed, the last of its energy spent. She whispered into the quiet air. "They heard you, Evan. They all did. The sun dipped low, painting the dunes in crimson. For a long while she just sat there, watching the horizon, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Then, from the distance, she saw movement. A human rescue craft, its hull scorched from the battle, flying low and slow. She stood, weak but determined, waving her arms. The ship landed near the tower, kicking up clouds of sand. A group of humans stepped out, cautious but curious. One of them held a small scanner. "Are you the source of the transmission?" he asked. Lyra nodded faintly. "Yes," she said. Her voice cracked. "But it wasn't just mine," the man frowned. "Then whose was it?" She smiled sadly, pressing her hand over her heart. "Someone who gave me everything." The rescue ship's engines cooled slowly as it settled beside the old comms tower. The air smelled of burned circuits and dust, but the horizon was quiet now, peaceful in a way Lyra hadn't felt since the crash. She stood near the ramp, her silver hair catching the golden light of dawn. The human crew worked quickly, scanning the area, repairing systems, transmitting reports. But their eyes kept drifting toward her, the pale alien girl who spoke with a voice that was both human and not. They had all heard the broadcast. Every world had. One soldier approached her carefully, holding a datapad. "You're the one who stopped the fleets," he said. "Your message made both sides stand down. What did you do?" Lyra looked down, fingers trembling. "I only spoke," she said softly. But the words were his. The man frowned. "Whose?" Lyra turned her gaze toward the far desert. The wind had already buried most of the wreckage, but she could still feel him there. "Evan." The silence felt alive with his memory. "The man who gave me his voice," she whispered. The soldier didn't ask more. He just bowed his head slightly, as if understanding something far beyond words. Later, inside the ship's small medical bay, Lyra sat beside the observation window. Her reflection stared back at her, tired, scarred, yet strangely calm. The ship hummed quietly as it ascended through the thin atmosphere. Below, the desert shimmered like liquid gold. For the first time, she felt truly alone. The voice that now belonged to her still carried his warmth, but his presence, his laughter, his silent courage, his eyes, those were gone. Her heart ached with a pain she didn't know how to name. "Evan," she whispered into the glass. "I used your voice. I hope you heard it wherever you are." The words echoed softly in the cabin, lingering like a promise. Hours later, the ship landed at the nearest human colony, a growing settlement built of steel domes and glass towers. Crowds had gathered outside, waiting. Humans and Erin alike stood side by side, watching as Lyra stepped out. Cameras blinked, drones hovered, and reporters whispered her name, the alien girl who ended the war. The one who spoke peace in a human's tone. She wasn't ready for their eyes, but she knew she had to face them. Evan would have wanted that. So she lifted her head and smiled faintly. A human official stepped forward, offering his hand. "Your message changed everything," he said. "We're rebuilding now together. You've given us something no treaty ever could." Lyra shook his hand gently. "He gave it," she replied. "Not me." They led her through the colony. Children waved, soldiers saluted, and even the Erin citizens bowed their heads respectfully. Yet all the joy around her felt distant. Her heart stayed in the desert, where silence still guarded the memory of one human who never needed words to be great. That night, she walked alone outside the colony walls. The stars stretched endlessly above, just as they had the night she first met him. She stopped at the edge of the dunes, the cold wind brushing against her face. From her pouch, she pulled out a small object, Evan's old data drive, half burned but still intact. She had taken it from the wreck before she left. With trembling hands, she activated it. A small hologram flickered to life, Evan's face smiling shyly, his voice preserved from old recordings. "Testing. On 2, the hologram said cheerfully. "If anyone finds this, you've probably seen my workshop mess. Sorry about that. I was never good at cleaning up." Lyra laughed softly, tears filling her eyes. The recording continued. "If you're listening, it means my machines worked. Maybe you're out there flying again. Maybe you finally found your voice." Her chest tightened. Evan's image smiled. "If so, don't waste it. Speak loudly. Speak kindly. Make them listen." The hologram faded into static. Lyra wiped her tears, her heart both broken and full. She looked up at the sky, whispering, "I did, Evan, I did." A gentle breeze swept the dunes. For a fleeting moment it carried a sound, soft, low, like a familiar hum. Maybe it was just the wind, or maybe something deeper. She closed her eyes, letting the silence embrace her. "Your voice lives in me," she said quietly, "and it always will." The stars above shimmered brighter as if answering her. When Lyra finally returned to the colony, she went straight to the central square. There, under the shared sky of two worlds, she placed Evan's repaired modulation core on a pedestal. It glowed faintly, humming with quiet energy. "This belongs to both our kinds," she said to the gathered crowd. "The human who built it taught me that silence can be strength, and that even one voice given in kindness can change everything." The people bowed their heads. Some cried. Others simply stood in reverent silence. And as Lyra stepped back, her gaze lifted once more to the sky, where peace now drifted between stars once divided. Her voice, carrying his heart, had stopped a war. His silence had saved a galaxy, and together, even apart, they remained what they had always been. The voice and the echo,